Our gospel lesson this morning comes again from the 13th chapter of Matthew, where Matthew has collected a series of parables about the nature of the kingdom of heaven. Today's reading begins at verse 24, which you can find on page 14 in the New Testament part of your Bible. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So, when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The slaves said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No. For in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. The gospel of the Lord. Now, I don't know what your yard looks like, but I've got a plant growing in various places in my yard, and I think it's a weed. But then I'm not sure. Mostly, it appears in pots, where I already have flowering plants that I do want, that I mostly planted there on purpose. I've got some begonias and some Pense and some petunias. But mixed in among the stuff I want, occasionally appears this plant that I do not know. Now, it started growing in several places 2-3 years ago, and it starts out with a really nice stalk and leaves that look like it will burst into bloom and flower at any moment. But I pull them up mostly, and so early last week I pulled them all up, except I saved one and I brought it in a paper cup, and if any of you knows what it is, I'd be glad to find that out after worship. Yeah, Jane, you can help me. But I'm pretty convinced that I don't want it growing in my garden. But then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not sure about what growth really looks like. Now, as Matthew tells the gospel of Jesus Christ, he collects these collection of parables about the kingdom of heaven, the realm where God rules. And Jesus uses a collection of ordinary, everyday items to help illustrate the nature of the kingdom. A sower sowing seeds, this field of wheat and weeds, and in future weeks we'll look at the familiar mustard seed and yeast and treasures found in fields and nets full of all kinds of fish. And so we learn from the whole chapter that the kingdom of heaven is not just one thing, but has many characteristics. And so today we get this field of wheat into which an enemy of the owner has sown weeds. Now, in the King James translation of the scripture, these weeds are called tares. Sometimes they're called darnel or cockle. It looks a lot like wheat, but it's poisonous. And if any of the seeds find their way into the wheat and then into the bread, the results will begin to sound like an Agatha Christie mystery story with a dead body. But in Jesus' story, the servants are very eager to take care of this problem, and they want to pull up all the tares or darnel or weeds. And I feel kind of sorry for these guys, because they're clearly trying to do the right thing by their owner. They're trying to do their job. Owner's pretty smart, however, and even though pulling up these weeds seems like a really good idea, their roots are completely intertwined underground, and so only at harvest time, at maturity, is it possible to separate the wheat and the weeds. Now, one way to read this story, an appropriate way, is as a judgment story. God is the owner, and God says, only at the end of time will everyone be sorted out and judged. Do not think you know good growth from what is to be thrown into the fire. I, God, know what true growth is, and I will do the sorting at the end. Okay, we got that. That's perfectly legitimate. But here's the problem. We have to do some sorting as we go through life. We have to decide all kinds of personal things in our life and in our church life. We study this and not that. We make a commitment to marriage to this person, forsaking all others. In worship, we sing this song and not that one. we commit our energy and our time and our money to this mission work and not that one, to all kinds of various causes and not these other causes. And eventually the pastor nominating committee is going to come and recommend one person that they have chosen among all the people whose paperwork they read and the several that they talked with personally. So we have to make a decision along our lives. What is good growth? What does it look like? Now, one of the answers, which may or may not be very helpful, comes in this ancient story about our faith ancestor Jacob. You will remember, as Bill reminded us all, that Jacob is the younger twin son of Isaac and Rebekah. Jacob and his brother Esau are very different kinds of people. They have different interests and different ways of approaching life, and Jacob, quite frankly, cheats Esau, first out of his birthright and then out of his father's blessing that should have gone to the firstborn son, and Esau is angry, and Jacob appropriately fears for his life. So Rebekah does encourage Jacob to leave home, to flee away to her family in Haran. And so Jacob leaves Beersheba, southern part of Judah, and begins to travel north toward Haran. Now there's a lot of risk in this decision. Potential, yes. But how is that trip going to fulfill the promises that were made to Abraham and then to Isaac, the promise of land, the promise of many descendants, the promise that this family will become a blessing to others? So an appropriate question would be, what kind of good can come out of this trip? Maybe growth, maybe just a lot of weeds. Jacob seems to be traveling alone, and on the first night he sleeps alone in a desert place. But he has an amazing dream. He dreams of angels from God descending and ascending on a ladder that he believes connects earth with heaven. Jacob experiences the presence of God in a way he never thought would happen. He hears God speaking and promising to be with him always and to provide blessings in ways that Jacob will never be able to imagine until they actually happen. Abundant growth, bounty are promised. Things Jacob never thought of, because of course he didn't have much of an idea of what real growth looked like. In the article that I have written for the mailbag, which will come out toward the end of this week, there'll be an article that I wrote, and it references another article on characteristics of growing churches. Not big congregations necessarily, but congregations that are growing. Some of the items may match what we would think of as growth, but some of them perhaps do not. Now, one of the characteristics, you will not be surprised, of growing churches is a commitment to children and youth. Duh. And we think, perhaps, that automatically means a big youth group. Well, maybe, but maybe not. It might mean a Sunday school class, small, sitting around a table where children talk and listen and question and learn, and where the teacher shares her faith. And 20 years from now, those young people will be making adult decisions of work and marriage and worship. Maybe in a place far from here, but based on values and commitments that they learned in Sunday school. But we might not recognize it as growth at the time. Last Tuesday and Friday mornings, 3 of our young people, the 3 that just graduated from high school, Ben Nelson, Elizabeth Nelson, and Trevor Contunda, went with David Rothhauser to the Tarrant Area Food Bank to fulfill our monthly contribution of time. If you were here last week, we talked about how we were going to make that happen. There were pictures, maybe you saw them on Facebook or in an email. One of the characteristics of growing congregations is a commitment to mission, reaching out beyond the walls of our building to helping those who are not in our church. Now, does the effort of 3 just graduated from high school kids and 1 adult constitute growth? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Now, unless you have just walked into the building, I think everybody knows that we're having lunch today. Spring Creek. We ordered food for 80, so even if you hadn't thought you'd stay, it's not too late. And not only will there be good food and good fellowship, but there will be a presentation about a capital campaign. Major. Well, not quite as major as the one we did in 1996, but important. Now, some of the projects that are being proposed are tangible. Things that you'll be able to reach out and touch or sit on, as in the case of new pew cushions. But a new sign. Upgrades to the Fellowship Hall men's restroom, which I won't talk about in worship. The others are not quite so tangible, some of them. A commitment to build a scholarship fund. A commitment to a clean water project through Living Waters for the World, which is a project of another part of the Presbyterian Church in this country. You'll hear all about that. And we're all going to be challenged, invited, challenged, encouraged to make a commitment to this campaign above our regular commitment of money to the worship and work of this church. Is this what growth looks like? Maybe you have some questions. A lot of people so far have prayed that indeed it will. All of these ideas that you'll hear about grew out of conversations held around tables in this building, and a focus on how we might be able to create a culture of generosity in our life here, how we can focus on giving, how we can not get caught in a spirit of fear of what the future might bring. I hope we'll make a commitment. I think everybody ought to make a commitment. Here's the deal. If you pledge $1 a week for 156 weeks, which is 3 years, that's $156. If you paid $5 a week for 156 weeks for 3 years, that's $780. Maybe you've got thousands. That'd be okay too. But whatever happens, we can give thanks to God and pray that it will indeed be God's growth. For only God knows for sure what good growth looks like. And God will make that happen. Now, the night of Jacob's dream, alone in the dark, he received some promises from God. At the time, I don't think Jacob had a clue what real growth looked like. He had no idea the growth that was going to happen within himself, the deep spiritual growth. He had no idea what the growth in his family was going to look like. 2 wives, lots of servants, 12 sons, and at least 1 daughter. He had no idea. The parable of the kingdom, which Jesus tells us, is of growth, good growth, and bad growth. At least that's what the workers thought. But there was another perspective, one presented in the wisdom of the owner of the field. Growth does occur. That's for sure, and that's good news. But growth doesn't always look like we think it looks, and that's the challenge. And so we hang in with God until the end and rejoice in how it all turns out. For our God will make it all turn out right. Thanks be to God.